Now back to Labor's plan to rip the guts out of regional Australia. $10 billion. I'll repeat that, $10 billion worth of bush projects promised at the last election, now on the chopping block in next week's budget. Shadow Infrastructure Minister Bridget McKenzie joins me now. Bridget, it's great to see you. Last week it was this methane tax. Now the regions are under attack. They can't catch a break under the Albanese government. Why are they so dirty on the bush, this mob?
Yeah, look, Glee, so it's great to see you again. They've got a real vendetta against the 9 million of us that don't live in capital cities, and whether it's the methane pledge, another backflip by this new Labor government. When we went to Glasgow, they agreed with our government that we shouldn't sign up to it as a nation. It wasn't in our national interest, and now they're backflipping on that. We've seen Tanya Plibersek come out hunting much needed water resources in the Murray Darling Basin as the new water minister. And now as we head into the budget, the only place that this government is looking to slash funding to is rural and regional Australia and our industries. And honestly, if you don't live in a capital city, why would you think that this Albanese Labor government is on your side by the way they're behaving?
Bridget, I know you spent a bit of time in central Queensland in the past week or so. I can remember Anthony Albanese standing beside the Paradise Dam up there in Bundy and committing the $460 million or whatever it is to be a 50-50 partner with the Palaszczuk government. It's such a vital project. You've got the Urana Dam, you've got other dams, and yet now they're prepared to walk away.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. I mean, there's so much uncertainty right across rural and regional Australia as we head into this budget about what the Albanese government is going to keep and what they're going to ditch when it comes to vital infrastructure projects right throughout the country. We know that the lazy $50 billion that Chalmers found in his budget bottom drawer was as a result of the work of rural and regional Australians, our fabulous receipts in our resources industry, our income tax receipts as well, all going up and up and up into the future as the demand for that resource increases. It's funding our universal healthcare, our public education and private education from a federal government perspective. So much needed, but it also needs economic and social infrastructure spending, roads, bridges, ports, airports, plus investment in all those facilities that if you live in a capital city, you take for granted. Things like emergency, CQ Rescue. We put a lot of that program funding into ensuring that organisation was ready to help Central Queenslanders deal with the next cyclone or natural disaster, funding medical training facilities. And then for Albo and the Labor Party more broadly, Chalmers, to come out and call that sort of investment waste is just incredibly offensive. And now we sort of see announced over the weekend the things that they are investing in is $2.2 billion into a suburban rail loop here in Melbourne to help Daniel Andrews get re-elected. It just beggars belief with the politicisation.
I was going to ask you about that, Bridget. I mean, New South Wales getting 2 times less funding than Victoria. There's a nice lump there for Queensland, both Labor states. Now, I know you keep a pretty close eye on Daniel Andrews. He's heading to the polls in just over a month. It is pretty interesting timing, isn't it?
Yeah, look, Peter, it's blatant. This government's made a big song and dance about trust and integrity and projects needing to stack up with business cases and the like. The one thing that they've committed to funding over the weekend in this upcoming budget is over $2.2 billion for a project in Melbourne here that the Victorian Auditor General itself has said the business case just doesn't stack up. So instead of running it through Infrastructure Australia, as Albo said he would in his budget in reply just back in March, that all these projects were going to have to go through a pretty rigorous assessment phase if the Labor Party won government. They've thrown that out the window at their first opportunity to help get Daniel Andrews re-elected. And you're right, budget handed down federally, end of October. Victorians hitting the polls mid-November. The timing is incredible and incredibly politicised. You know, it's hard not to be cynical.
We've spoken in the past about the raw deal that the regions and the bush got during the pandemic. You know, there were impositions, there were closures of businesses, there were lockdowns that came as a result of, you know, these dictatorial decisions made in Melbourne and Canberra and, of course, Brisbane. What is it that country Australia has to do to get the attention of these people?
I mean, it's just incredible, given the commitment rural and regional Australians have to just getting the job done, getting on with it. We put up with the droughts and the floods, as we're seeing in 3 states at the moment, the bushfires. We have less access to things that people take for granted in the city, like doctors, like allied health professionals. Our kids' education is harder to complete, etc. But we do it because we love what we do out here, and it actually is in the national interest. And then to have a federal government who is so dismissive of what we do and what we need to keep doing it is just incredible. And the Labor Party will try and frame that up as, you know, oh, you know, the Nationals are running a scare campaign. Well, I'm sorry, it's the facts. Only a Liberal national federal government invests in rural and regional communities. And, you know, I think it's an indictment on the Labor Party that they cannot see beyond the boundaries of capital cities and the potential that exists out in the regions. That's not only in our interests as citizens of this country, but also investing in us builds our national capacity going forward when you look at the exports we produce.
And Bridget, I think this also goes to the heart of credibility, not just Labor politicians, but all politicians. Anthony Albanese stood there during the campaign and said that the stage 3 tax cuts would happen. And people voted for the Labor Party. Many people would have voted for the Labor Party on the basis that he gave that commitment. Now, same deal. Stood up during the election campaign and said, we will commit to these projects, made a big song and dance about it, and is now pulling the rug from those projects. How do politicians overcome that perception where there's a lack of credibility and, frankly, you know, they lie?
I was just going to say, how do they overcome that problem? Peter, my mum raised me one way, and that is to always tell the truth. And the way you rebuild trust or you build trust with people is to actually be open and honest and accountable. And I think that is what the Australian people deserve in their political, the political class in this country, whether it's state, federal or local. And it's incumbent on all of us, even when it's bad news, to be upfront and honest with the Australian people. We just went to an election, as you say, and the Labor government made several commitments that they've turned their back on. The tax cuts, we still haven't got a definitive answer that this won't be something they revisit up to the 2024 budget cycle. And it's incredible they voted for this thing. Then they recommitted to it in the election. It would be an absolute breach of trust with the Australian public and, again, feed into that problem that people are having with the political class.
Bridget McKenzie, always great to see you. Thank you for joining us tonight.